They didn't say my name. That was the first thing. The voicemail began with my mother's voice crisp rehearsed like she was reading from a script. "Hi, we've made a decision. We're restructuring Carter Industries. Effective immediately. You're no longer part of the business. You'll be hearing from our attorney." Then, silence. Not even a thank you. Not even a Mia. It was always my name on the invoices on the balance sheets on the refinancing papers, but not on this message. I played it again slower than once more, just to be sure I hadn't missed a second message. Something warmer tucked behind the first. There wasn't. "My name is Mia Carter. I'm 38. I've been with Carter Industries since I was 21. That's 17 years. 17 tax seasons. 17 Decembers without a full vacation. The company carries my family's name, my grandfather's name technically, but I was the one who held it upright when it started leaning. And now, I was out. Not with a conversation, not with a meeting, just a voicemail. I sat in my kitchen in Denver, mug still full of coffee but gone cold. The sound of the refrigerator hum was louder than usual. Or maybe it was just the silence pressing in behind her words. My father didn't speak in the message, but I knew he was there. I could hear his quiet exhale after she said attorney, a soft punctuation to their decision. "His name is James Carter. My mother's Laura. They built the company together after my grandfather passed. Increasingly, but it was my hands, my hours that kept the gears turning. They made a decision together. I could have called them back, asked why, begged for some part of the truth. I didn't. Instead, I opened my laptop, found the email chain with the lawyer I'd met at that boring finance conference 2 years ago in Dallas. In the message, I didn't explain. I didn't ask for advice. I just wrote, "It's time, let's talk options." Then I hit send. The first time I walked through the factory floor at Carter Industries, I was 21. My shoes were too clean, my suit too formal. I remember one of the line managers joking that I looked like I'd gotten lost on my way to a bank interview. He wasn't wrong, but I was eager, naive, and stubborn enough to learn. My grandfather, William Carter, had started the company in 1967 with one welding machine and a handshake. He passed away just after I finished college, and the company was passed to my parents, James and Laura. 50% to my father, 30% to my mother, and 20% set aside, unspoken, for when my older brother Ethan decided to join the legacy. He never did. Ethan preferred startups and co-working spaces. He said metal fabrication was too dusty for someone with vision. He moved to Austin, failed upward 3 times, and eventually came back to Colorado. Not to the factory floor, though, straight to the strategic direction office. Meanwhile, I had stayed. I started in procurement, moved into payroll, took night classes to understand supply chain logistics, then became the one they called when the books didn't balance or the loan paperwork needed rewriting before morning. No one said thank you, but they stopped questioning whether I belonged. My mother used to tell people I was the numbers girl like I was still 12 and doing her checkbook at the kitchen table. Mia keeps us all grounded. She'd laugh. Don't know what we'd do without her. Funny thing is, I believed that. I lived in that sentence for years. I wore it like armor until the year I pulled a second mortgage on my house to keep the payroll running when 2 key clients defaulted. I never told anyone, not even my parents. I just sent the funds under a shell LLC so it wouldn't look like desperation. I called it stabilization liquidity in the quarterly report. The next quarter, when things evened out, I overheard my father telling a board member, "Ethan made a smart call on that invoice strategy." Proud of the kid, Ethan hadn't opened QuickBooks in months. I swallowed it like always. I told myself it didn't matter who got credit as long as the company stayed afloat. That was my role. Not the name in the paper, but the name in the emergency file cabinet. Over time, things shifted. My access to high-level planning meetings started fading. My mother said I was overloaded already and should focus on what you're good at. Then came the updated org chart. My name wasn't on it. I asked about it. Laura smiled, touched my arm, and said, "Mia, you know we value you, but this is just a visual. Don't overthink it." That was 2 years ago. 1 year ago, I noticed my headshot was missing from the company website. The About page listed James as founder, Laura as president, and Ethan as executive vision lead. There was no CFO, no mention of finance at all. I took a screenshot not because I needed proof, but because part of me still couldn't believe it. I had become the invisible gear, the piece that only matters when it breaks. I stayed anyway because somewhere beneath the silence, I still believed they'd see me again, that all the years I kept them afloat counted for something, that maybe, just maybe, blood still meant belonging. It didn't happen all at once. That's the cruel thing. It wasn't a firing. It wasn't even a fight. It was a slow subtraction, one folder at a time, one shared drive permission quietly removed, one group thread I suddenly stopped seeing. I noticed it first when I went to update the vendor schedule and couldn't access the Google Sheet I had built from scratch 6 years ago. Access denied, the screen said. I thought it was a glitch. I emailed Ethan. He replied, "Oh, yeah, we've consolidated finance ops into a different workflow. Nothing urgent." I asked to be looped in. I never was. A few weeks later, my badge didn't open the second floor conference room. Laura said the system had changed and she'd check on it. She never did. One by one, the parts of the company that had once passed through my hands now moved without me. Faster, messier, but no one seemed to care. Then came the annual shareholder packet. For the first time, it arrived late and printed not emailed. My copy was missing key schedules. The charts were different. The language was softer, more forward-facing. I recognized Ethan's tone all over it, but what caught me most wasn't the numbers. It was the signature block. Laura James, Ethan, 3 names, not 4. I checked the official documents. My ownership was still there 40%, but on every memo, every proposal, every policy shift I had vanished. And this time, there was no refrigerator hum to drown it out. Just absence, just blank space where I used to be. They didn't argue me out. They just made me optional until I wasn't anything at all. I thought of confronting Laura. I thought of saying, "You once told me I was the glue." But then I found the PDF version of the restructuring notice, the one sent to legal. I wasn't supposed to see it. At the bottom, next to the signature lines, I saw the name listed under initiated by Laura Carter, President Mother. The same woman who once held my head when I sobbed over a missed quarterly target. The same woman who told me, "Mia, we couldn't do this without you." She had signed the document that said, "We no longer need you." I didn't respond, not to the packet, not to Ethan's memo, not even to the voicemail. What would I have said? "You forgot me." They hadn't. They erased me. There's a difference. For a few days, I waited out of old habit. Some piece of me still half hoped someone would follow up, ask if I was okay. Say it had been a misunderstanding, that they'd fix it. No one did. And that's when something shifted quietly. Not like a storm, more like a door clicking shut behind you. You don't hear the noise. You just feel the air change. I opened the old Gmail thread, the one from Dallas 2 years ago, a boring finance conference in an even more boring hotel. But I'd met a lawyer there, Sarah Lynn, from a boutique corporate law firm that specialized in private equity transitions. We'd exchanged cards. Nothing serious, but I'd kept her contact. I typed a short message, just 5 lines. No emotion, no backstory. "Sarah, I'm ready to explore options regarding my 40% ownership stake in Carter Industries. There have been internal changes. Let me know a good time to talk." Mia Carter. Her reply came within the hour. "Understood. I'll loop in our team. Quiet diligence first. No alerts." That phrase stuck with me. Quiet diligence. It felt like a language I finally understood. While they were restructuring me out, I was preparing something else. Not revenge, not even justice, just exit, but not on their terms. I started gathering records, emails, financial transfers, old QuickBooks backups, the unacknowledged personal loans I'd made to float the company through tough quarters. Everything I'd ever done to keep Carter from crumbling, all the contributions they never listed. My folders were full of them. Spreadsheets, PDFs, bank confirmations, a paper trail they thought I'd forgotten. I hadn't. I printed them all out, labeled, each one color-coded the years. It took days. I worked at night with nothing but the desk lamp and the low thrum of Denver rain against the window. I didn't feel angry. I felt accurate, like I was finally balancing the books, not for the company, but for myself. Sarah and her team reviewed everything. We discussed structures, buyer profiles, how to do this cleanly, quietly, and legally. I didn't tell anyone, not friends, not even my assistant at work. They had taken 17 years of presence and condensed it into a single voicemail. I would take that silence and make it expensive. We didn't meet in a conference room. We met in a corner booth at a quiet restaurant in Boulder, just across the valley from Denver. No logos, no paperwork on the table, just tea conversation and confirmation. The man across from me introduced himself as Michael Evans. He was polite, understated gray sweater, calm tone, no pitch deck. His firm specialized in acquiring minority stakes in mid-size family businesses, especially ones showing signs of transition turbulence. That's what he called it, transition turbulence. I called it abandonment. Sarah had connected us quietly legally. Precisely. Michael didn't ask me to bash my family. He didn't need to. My data had spoken for me. The cash infusions, the off-book payroll rescues, the overlapping loan guarantees I had covered for my personal assets. He nodded as he flipped through the binder I'd prepared color-coded, tabbed by year, with copies of the QuickBooks reports that no longer matched what the board now claimed. You were the stopgap, he said simply. They leaned on you until they didn't need to anymore or thought they didn't. I said nothing, just watched the steam rise from his cup. Over the next week, his firm ran their own diligence. They requested access to board minutes, partnership contracts, equipment, lease schedules. Most of it was public record or accessible due to my standing stake. What they found wasn't clean. A line item marked strategic reinvestment traced back to a failed expansion project in Nevada, a location Ethan had personally backed and Laura had championed. Over $800,000 in unreported losses tucked behind soft-coded budgets and vague language. Another report flagged duplicated payments to a marketing agency with no physical address, a shell, most likely, or a favor, or worse. I didn't press for answers. I didn't need to. I had what I needed. Within 2 weeks, the purchase agreement was finalized. My 40% stake, valued fairly by a third-party assessor, was transferred in full to Michael's firm. No drama, no board vote required. The operating agreement last updated in 2016 had no right of first refusal clause. I had every right to sell. We signed the papers in a small downtown office, neutral ground. The table was polished maple. No family crests, no Carter legacy quotes on the wall, just signatures. Just silence. After the funds cleared, Sarah drafted my exit memo. I didn't read it twice. Instead, I opened the original voicemail from Laura just once more. I listened all the way through. You'll be hearing from our attorney. They had meant it as a warning, a wall, a dismissal. It ended up being a door. I forwarded the message to my archived folder. Then I sent a new email. Short, final transfer complete. All communications to be directed through counsel. No regards, no closing sentiment, just closure. And for the first time in 17 years, I closed the Carter folder on my desktop and didn't save changes. The first call came at 6:12 a.m. I let it ring, then silenced the second. By the time I'd finished my coffee, there were 16 missed calls. By noon, it was 47. The next morning, 72. Ethan tried every number. My cell, my office, even Sarah's direct line, which she ignored. He left voicemails, each one more frantic, less coherent. On the third day, I picked up. Not because I wanted to, but because I was curious what panic sounded like in his voice. Mia. Mia, you have to undo this. Please, you don't understand what's happening. He was out of breath. Background noise sounded like someone pacing on tile. They froze everything. He gasped. The investor. Your buyer. They're requesting a forensic audit. They're saying there are discrepancies. Mia, they're going line by line. I let the silence sit a second longer. Then, that sounds like standard due diligence, Ethan. He made a choked sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. You don't get it. They're going back years. They flagged the Nevada reports, the vendor contracts, even Mom's restructuring memos. They found gaps, Mia. They found things that could look bad. Or things that are bad, I asked, voice calm. He didn't answer. You have to help us, he said finally. You have to talk to them. They'll listen to you. Just tell them it's all fine, that we're clean. I can't do that. Why not? I leaned back in my chair. Because you said I was out. He went quiet. I was told I'd hear from your attorney, I continued. Instead, my buyer heard from yours, and now your company has a new stakeholder with questions that I no longer have to answer. Mia, his voice cracked. It wasn't supposed to go like this. Mom didn't think you'd actually what? He hesitated. Actually leave. Not like that. Not sell your shares. Not to them. I waited. You were supposed to fight for it, he said low. That made me pause because for a moment he sounded almost honest, almost like the kid I used to sneak popsicles with after school in the break room, before we grew into roles we never chose and became people we couldn't recognize. You wanted me to fight, I said, so you could be the one who forgave me when I lost. He didn't deny it. There it was. The unspoken arrangement, the setup. They'd erase me, and if I reacted poorly, raged, demanded, begged, they'd keep control. And if I stayed quiet, they thought I'd come crawling back. But I hadn't done either. I'd walked out the side door and locked it behind me. You could fix this, he said one last time. Just one call. No, I said you fix it. You're the one who said I wasn't part of the real decisions. Now you are. I ended the call. He called back. I didn't answer. Sarah called 10 minutes later with an update. The investors' audit team had officially launched a compliance investigation. My former title was flagged in multiple filings but omitted in recent reports. Legal exposure was likely. In short, they were in trouble. I felt no joy, no anger, just stillness, like I'd finally stepped outside the storm I'd been standing in for 17 years without realizing it. A few days later, I received an email from Laura. Not to apologize, just one line. Can we meet privately? No lawyers. I didn't reply. I printed the email, slid it into a folder, labeled it after, and just like that, the collapse wasn't loud. It wasn't a bang. It was quiet, like a building falling in slow motion after the last support beam is quietly pulled away. I didn't block them. I didn't need to. Ethan stopped calling after the audit became public within the local business network. Laura switched to emailing once a week. Vague professional always signed warmly Mom. James never reached out at all. I forwarded everything to Sarah's office. Her paralegal responded with templated replies. I never saw the contents again. It was easier that way. Some part of me had expected the silence to feel like grief. I braced for it like a second storm behind the first, but it never came. Instead, there was a space I hadn't felt in years. Not loneliness, not sadness, breathing room. I stopped waking up with my jaw clenched, stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. I began having weekends again. Coffee that stayed hot. Sunlight through the windows that didn't feel wasted. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, my calendar was mine. Not filled with board prep, not crisis control, not fixing someone else's mess while being told I was lucky to be involved. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I finally understood something. They didn't cut me out because I was weak or inconvenient. They cut me out because I made it work. Because I had become the part they could never control and never fully credit. So they erased me. But here's the thing about being erased. It doesn't make you disappear. It just makes you harder to manipulate. The package arrived on a Thursday. No return address? No card, just a brown padded envelope sealed carefully. My name printed in my mother's handwriting. Inside a photo frame, the same one that used to sit on the console table in the Carter main office, the one near the front lobby. In the photo, we were standing in front of the old warehouse. Ethan, James, Laura smiling like we'd all earned the same place, like we'd built something together. Back then, I believed we had. But now looking closer, I saw what I hadn't seen before. The frame had a new chip in one corner. A hairline crack ran through the glass right across my face. Not shattered, not intentional, just worn like time itself had rubbed me out. I didn't fix it. I didn't hang it up. I didn't even keep it on my desk. I placed it in a drawer, closed it without sound, and with it closed the last open door. No rage, no need for closure. They had said, "You're out," and I had answered, "Understood." That was enough. Sometimes the final word isn't something you say, it's what you choose not to. And sometimes the most honest picture of a family is the one they try to return to you because they can't stand to look at it anymore. If you've ever been quietly written out of the frame, not for what you did wrong, but because they couldn't stand how much you held together, you don't have to explain. Just leave one symbol below. Maya Carter's journey in the story reveals a profound lesson about self-worth and the power of reclaiming one's agency. For 17 years, she poured her life into Carter Industries, silently stabilizing the family business, while her contributions were overlooked and her presence erased. The slow, deliberate exclusion by her family taught her that loyalty and sacrifice do not guarantee recognition or belonging. Instead of fighting for a place that no longer valued her, Mia learned to step away with quiet strength, choosing to exit on her own terms. By selling her 40% stake and refusing to clean up her family's mess, she realized that being erased doesn't equate to disappearing. It frees you from manipulation. Her meticulous preparation and strategic exit underscore the importance of self-reliance and the courage to prioritize personal integrity over familial expectations. Mia's stillness after the storm reflects her newfound clarity. Her value was never tied to their validation. The cracked photo frame tucked away in a drawer symbolizes her acceptance that some bonds are better left behind. Ultimately, Mia's lesson is that true power lies in recognizing when to walk away and embracing the freedom that comes with it.
Growing up as the youngest of 3 siblings, I'd always been the family afterthought. While my brother Marcus excelled at everything, star quarterback, valedictorian, full scholarship to Harvard Business School, I quietly pursued art and hospitality management at a state school. The family narrative was clear. Marcus was destined for greatness and I was destined to struggle. "She's got no business sense," Dad would tell his golf buddies whenever my career came up. Wasting time on hotel management when she could have followed Marcus into finance. Mom would nod sympathetically as if my career choice was a personal disappointment she'd learned to accept with grace. The family dynamic crystallized perfectly at every gathering. Marcus would hold court at the center of attention, regaling everyone with stories of his latest business conquest, while I sat quietly in the corner, occasionally asked to help serve drinks or clear plates. It was an arrangement everyone seemed comfortable with. Everyone except me, though I never voiced my objection. 3 years ago, when Marcus announced his engagement to Victoria, a pharmaceutical heiress from Connecticut, the family celebration lasted for weeks. The engagement party was held at the country club, with 200 guests toasting their perfect match. I was invited, naturally, but seated at a table with distant cousins and family friends who barely knew my name. "Isn't it wonderful how successful Marcus has become?" Aunt Helen had gushed that night. And poor little Emma still figuring things out. The condescending pat on my shoulder that followed became a family trademark gesture, one I'd grown accustomed to receiving. The wedding planning consumed our family for 18 months. Victoria wanted everything perfect for their power couple celebration, as she called it. The venue selection alone took 6 months, with the family touring luxury hotels across the East Coast, searching for a location worthy of Marcus's success story. When they finally settled on the Grand Metropolitan, a flagship luxury hotel in downtown Boston, the family was ecstatic. "Only the best for Marcus and Victoria," Mom declared. "This is where important people get married." The irony wasn't lost on me, but I kept my thoughts to myself as always. The wedding weekend arrived with all the pomp the family had anticipated. Marcus's groomsmen were a collection of investment bankers, consultants, and entrepreneurs, each more accomplished than the last. Victoria's side included pharmaceutical executives, old money socialites, and political connections. Together, they represented the kind of network Marcus had always wanted to join. I arrived at the Grand Metropolitan on Friday evening for the rehearsal dinner, wearing a simple navy dress I'd chosen specifically to avoid drawing attention. The hotel's opulent lobby buzzed with wedding guests, all designer clothes and confident laughter. I checked in quietly at the reception desk, using the room reservation Marcus had made for family members. "Emma Williams?" the desk clerk asked, consulting her computer. "Oh yes, we have you in the premium suite on the 28th floor." She handed me a key card with an odd smile. "Please let us know if there's anything at all we can do to make your stay more comfortable." The rehearsal dinner took place in the hotel's private dining room, an elegant space with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Marcus and Victoria held court at the head table, surrounded by their wedding party and immediate family. I was seated at a side table with elderly relatives and family friends who spent most of the evening discussing their various ailments. "Emma's still in the hospitality business," Mom explained to the table when someone asked about my career. "She manages some little boutique hotels." The dismissive tone was subtle but unmistakable. Several people nodded politely before changing the subject back to Marcus's recent promotion to senior vice president. The wedding ceremony itself was flawless. Victoria looked stunning in her custom Varawang gown, and Marcus beamed with the confidence of a man whose life was unfolding exactly as planned. I sat in the fourth row with family friends, watching my brother marry into the kind of success our parents had always dreamed of for him. After the ceremony, guests moved to the hotel's grand ballroom for the reception. The space was transformed into something from a fairy tale, with thousands of white orchids, crystal centerpieces, and ambient lighting that made everyone look like they belonged in a magazine spread. The guest list read like a who's who of Boston's business elite, with pharmaceutical executives, investment bankers, and political figures mingling over champagne and caviar. I found my assigned seat at table 12, near the back of the room. My table mates included a few of Marcus's high school teachers, some distant relatives I barely knew, and Victoria's elderly great-aunt who spent most conversations complaining about the volume of the music. It was clearly the table for guests who needed to be invited but didn't warrant premium placement. As dinner was served, I watched Marcus and Victoria making their rounds to each table, graciously thanking guests for attending. When they reached our table, Marcus gave me a quick hug and Victoria offered a polite smile, but they didn't linger. There were more important people to greet, more significant relationships to maintain. That's when Marcus's college friends at the neighboring table began their commentary. "Look at her sitting alone over there," whispered James, Marcus's former roommate who now worked at Goldman Sachs. His voice carried just enough to be audible at my table. "Definitely a budget table guest." "Who is she?" asked another groomsman, squinting in my direction. Marcus glanced over casually and shrugged. "Family obligation invite. My sister Emma. He's nice enough but not really our crowd if you know what I mean." The group nodded knowingly. In their world, family obligation invites were an unfortunate necessity. People who had to be included for appearance's sake but didn't really belong among the successful, accomplished guests who mattered. "What does she do?" James pressed. "Some kind of hotel management thing," Marcus replied with the same dismissive tone Mom had used the night before. "Nothing significant. He's always been more of the artistic type, you know? Not particularly business-minded." I felt heat rise to my cheeks but forced myself to maintain composure. This was Marcus's night and I had no intention of causing a scene. Instead, I smiled politely and focused on my dinner, pretending not to hear the conversation that had moved on to Marcus's latest business conquests. The wedding reception continued around me like a perfectly choreographed performance. Marcus and Victoria's first dance was elegant and practiced, clearly the result of months of professional lessons. The speeches were polished and heartfelt, painting a picture of a couple destined for greatness together. Everything was exactly as the family had envisioned, a celebration worthy of Marcus's success story. As the evening progressed, I found myself feeling increasingly invisible. Conversations swirled around me about business deals, investment strategies, and political connections. When people asked what I did for work, their interest visibly waned when I mentioned hospitality management. Several times I caught Marcus's friends glancing in my direction and whispering, clearly speculating about how I'd ended up at such an elegant celebration. During the cake cutting, I stepped outside onto the hotel's terrace for some fresh air. The view of Boston Harbor was breathtaking, with city lights reflecting off the water like scattered diamonds. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine what it would feel like to truly belong at an event like this. To be seen as successful and accomplished rather than tolerated as a family obligation. "Excuse me, are you Emma Williams?" I turned to find a well-dressed man in his 50s approaching. His name tag identified him as Robert Chin, hotel director. "Yes, that's me," I replied, wondering if there was some issue with my room or the evening's arrangements. "Ms. Williams, I've been looking for you all evening. I wanted to personally ensure everything is perfect for tonight's celebration. Is there anything at all we can do to enhance your experience?" His level of attention seemed excessive for a regular guest, but I appreciated the professional courtesy. Everything has been wonderful, thank you. The wedding is beautiful. I'm delighted to hear that. If you don't mind me asking, how do you know the bride and groom? Marcus is my brother, I explained. Mr. Chen's expression shifted to something I couldn't quite read. Your brother? Of course. Well, please don't hesitate to contact me personally if you need anything at all. Anything whatsoever. He handed me his business card with a slight bow before disappearing back into the reception. The interaction felt oddly formal, but I attributed it to the hotel's commitment to exceptional service for such a high-profile event. When I returned to the ballroom, the dancing was in full swing. Marcus and Victoria moved effortlessly through a crowd of accomplished friends and family members, each conversation another opportunity to network and build their already impressive social capital. I watched from my table as they were introduced to pharmaceutical executives, investment fund managers, and political figures who could open doors to even greater success. She really doesn't fit in here, does she? I heard one of Victoria's sorority sisters comment to another. They were standing near the bar, close enough to my table that their voices carried clearly. Who? Her friend asked. The sister. I think. She seems nice enough, but definitely not their usual crowd. Marcus mentioned she works in hospitality or something. Probably doesn't make much money. Well, at least she's trying to dress appropriately. That navy dress is actually quite lovely, even if it's clearly not designer. I felt my face burn with embarrassment, but I kept my expression neutral. This was exactly the kind of situation I'd spent my entire life navigating, being discussed as if I weren't present, being evaluated and found wanting by people who saw me as fundamentally different from themselves. The conversation continued as the evening wore on. Marcus's business school friends dominated the area around the head table, sharing stories of recent successes and future plans. Victoria's pharmaceutical connections clustered near the bar, discussing industry trends and regulatory changes. Everyone seemed to belong to some exclusive club that required credentials I simply didn't possess. Around 11 o'clock, as the reception began winding down, I decided to head back to my room. The evening had been beautiful and Marcus looked genuinely happy, but I felt increasingly out of place among his successful friends and Victoria's accomplished family members. I said my goodbyes to the relatives at my table and made my way toward the elevator. Emma. I turned to see Marcus approaching, slightly flushed from champagne and dancing. Thanks for coming, he said, pulling me into a quick hug. I know this probably isn't your usual scene, but it means a lot that you were here. It was beautiful, Marcus. Really. Victoria looks stunning and you both seem so happy. We are. And who knows? Maybe some of this success will rub off on you eventually. He grinned, clearly intending the comment as brotherly teasing, but it stung more than he realized. Maybe, I replied with a smile. Congratulations again. As I waited for the elevator, I could hear the reception continuing behind me. Laughter, music, and the sound of people who belonged together celebrating a future full of promise and possibility. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside with relief, grateful for a moment of solitude. The elevator stopped on the 15th floor and Robert Chin, the hotel director, stepped on. He looked surprised to see me. Ms. Williams. Leaving the celebration early? Just heading to my room. It's been a long day. Of course. I hope everything exceeded your expectations this evening. Absolutely. The staff has been exceptional and the venue is gorgeous. Mr. Chin smiled, but there was something in his expression I couldn't interpret. We're honored to host such an important celebration for your family. The elevator reached the 28th floor and I stepped out into the hallway. As the doors closed behind me, I heard Mr. Chin speaking quietly into his phone. She's heading to her room now. Yes, I'll make sure everything is ready for tomorrow morning. I thought it was an odd conversation for nearly midnight, but luxury hotels operated on different schedules than the rest of the world. Probably just making arrangements for tomorrow's checkout process or some other logistical detail. My suite was more luxurious than I'd expected. A spacious living area with harbor views, a marble bathroom, and amenities that probably cost more per night than most people's monthly rent. I settled onto the sofa with a cup of tea from the room's service bar, reflecting on the evening's events. The truth was I'd grown accustomed to being the family's afterthought. Marcus's success was real and impressive, and he deserved recognition for his achievements. If that meant I played a supporting role in family narratives, so be it. I had my own life, my own quiet satisfactions, even if they didn't translate into the kind of social capital that impressed wedding guests. The next morning I packed my belongings and prepared for checkout. The wedding had been beautiful, Marcus and Victoria were clearly well matched, and despite some uncomfortable moments, the evening had gone smoothly. I was looking forward to returning to my own routine, my own world where I didn't feel perpetually out of place. As I wheeled my suitcase toward the elevator, my phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. "Thanks again for last night. You were a good sport about everything. Love you, sis." I was typing a response when the elevator doors opened to reveal Robert Chin once again. "Ms. Williams, perfect timing. Would you mind joining me in my office for just a moment? There's something I need to discuss with you before you leave." His tone was professional but urgent, and I wondered if there was some issue with the bill or the room arrangements. I followed him through a series of corridors to an executive office suite I hadn't known existed. "Please have a seat," he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. "I wanted to personally thank you for choosing the Grand Metropolitan for your brother's wedding celebration. It was Marcus and Victoria's choice, but thank you. Everything was perfect." Mr. Chin opened a folder on his desk and consulted several documents. "Ms. Williams, I have to ask, did you enjoy staying at our property?" "Very much. The service has been exceptional and the facilities are beautiful." "I'm delighted to hear that. We take pride in exceeding expectations for all our guests." He paused, studying my face. "Especially our ownership." The word hung in the air between us like a question I didn't understand. "I'm sorry. Ms. Williams, surely you know that we've been expecting you? The entire staff has been briefed about your visit. We wanted to ensure everything was absolutely perfect for the weekend." I stared at him, completely confused. "I think there might be some mistake. I'm just here for my brother's wedding. I don't understand what you mean about ownership." Mr. Chen's expression shifted to something approaching concern. "Ms. Williams, you do realize that you own this hotel? Along with the other 47 properties in the Metropolitan Luxury Group." The words didn't make sense. I felt like I was listening to a conversation in a foreign language that I almost understood but not quite. "I think you have me confused with someone else," I said slowly. "I work in hospitality management, but I certainly don't own any hotels." Mr. Chin opened another folder and withdrew a series of legal documents. "According to our records, Emma Catherine Williams became the sole owner of Metropolitan Luxury Group 18 months ago, following the terms of your grandmother's trust fund. The transition was handled through Pemberton Walsh and Associates in New York." My grandmother's trust fund. The phrase hit me like cold water. I remembered the meeting with the lawyers after Grandma Rose's funeral. She'd been the family's success story. A woman who'd started with nothing and built a small boarding house into something larger. The family always spoke about her modest investments and small property holdings, but nobody discussed specifics. The lawyers had explained something about assets being held in trust until I turned 28, but the language was so dense and legal that I'd barely understood what they were telling me. They'd mentioned hotel properties and investment portfolios, but I'd assumed they meant small, local establishments, maybe a few bed and breakfasts or budget motels. 18 months ago was my 28th birthday, I said quietly. Exactly. Your grandmother's instructions were very specific. All Metropolitan Luxury Group properties were to be transferred to your control when you reached that age, with the provision that the transition be handled discreetly through our management company. Mr. Chin spread several documents across his desk. Property deeds, financial statements, and corporate filings that painted a picture I'd never imagined. The Grand Metropolitan wasn't just one hotel. It was the flagship property of a luxury chain spanning major cities across the country. Boston, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Miami. Each property worth tens of millions of dollars. The total portfolio value is approximately $1.2 billion, Mr. Chin continued matter-of-factly. Your grandmother was quite the businesswoman, Ms. Williams. She started with that boarding house in Salem and spent 6 decades building one of the most successful hospitality empires on the East Coast. I stared at the documents, trying to process information that seemed to belong to someone else's life. But the family always said she had modest investments. A few small properties. Your grandmother was extremely private about her business affairs. Even our board of directors didn't know the identity of the ultimate owner until the trust documents were executed 18 months ago. We've been operating under management company oversight, waiting for you to take active control. The room seemed to spin slightly. For 18 months, while my family had been treating me like a charity case who couldn't afford to keep up with Marcus's success, I'd been unknowingly one of the wealthiest people in Massachusetts. Ms. Williams, are you all right? Can I get you some water? I nodded, still staring at the financial statements. Annual revenues in the hundreds of millions. Properties in prime locations that I'd walked past countless times without knowing I owned them. A hospitality empire that my grandmother had built quietly and left entirely to me. Why didn't anyone tell me? Finally asked. Your grandmother's instructions were very specific about discretion. She wanted you to have time to establish yourself professionally before taking on this responsibility. The management company has been overseeing operations with the understanding that you would assume control when you felt ready. And last night, the wedding reception. Mr. Chin smiled slightly. We wanted to ensure everything was perfect for your family's celebration. When we saw the booking for Marcus Williams and realized the connection, the entire staff was briefed about providing exceptional service. We had no idea you didn't know about the ownership structure. I thought about the odd looks, the overly attentive service, the special treatment that had seemed excessive for a regular guest. The staff hadn't been providing exceptional customer service. They'd been taking care of their owner. Ms. Williams, what would you like us to do? The board of directors has been eager to meet with you for months. We have quarterly reports, expansion proposals, and several acquisition opportunities that require ownership approval. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. Hope you got home safely. Sorry if some of the guys were a little pretentious last night. You know how investment banker types can be. Investment banker types. I almost laughed at the irony. Mr. Chin, I need some time to process all of this. Can we schedule a meeting for next week? I'd like to review everything properly. Of course. Should I arrange for our legal team to brief you on the corporate structure? And perhaps our financial advisors can walk you through the portfolio performance. That would be helpful. I gathered the documents he'd given me, my hands still slightly trembling. One more thing. Last night my brother and his friends, they didn't know about any of this. No, ma'am. Your grandmother's discretion instructions were very clear. Only essential management personnel were informed of the ownership structure. I stood to leave, my mind racing with implications I was only beginning to understand. At the door I turned back to Mr. Chen. The wedding bill. For last night's reception. Already taken care of, Ms. Williams. Complimentary, naturally. We were honored to host your family's celebration. The elevator ride to the lobby felt surreal. I was the same person who had arrived 2 days ago, but everything had changed. As I walked through the opulent lobby toward the exit, I saw it with completely different eyes. This wasn't just a luxury hotel where my brother had gotten married. This was my luxury hotel. One of 48 properties that I apparently owned. My phone rang as I reached the street. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. Hey, just wanted to make sure you got out okay. Victoria and I are about to head to the airport for our honeymoon. Everything's fine, Marcus. Have a wonderful trip. Thanks. And hey, sorry again if last night felt a little overwhelming. Victoria's crowd can be pretty intense and my business school friends aren't always the most inclusive. You handled it well. It was fine. Really. Good. When we get back from Tuscany, maybe we can grab dinner. I'd love to hear more about what you're working on these days. Your hotel management thing. My hotel management thing. I looked back at the Grand Metropolitan, its elegant facade gleaming in the morning sunlight. I'd like that, I said. I have quite a bit to tell you about my work. After hanging up, I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, watching hotel guests come and go through the revolving doors. Business executives, tourists, families, all of them passing through a property that belonged to me. In a few hours, I would go home to my modest apartment and try to make sense of documents that described assets worth more than $1 billion. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Thank you for celebrating with us last night. The hotel was absolutely perfect. We couldn't have asked for a better venue. Hope you enjoyed yourself despite being surrounded by all us Type A personalities. I typed back. It was beautiful. The hotel really is exceptional. That was certainly true. And in a few days, when I met with Mr. Chin and the board of directors, I would begin to understand exactly how exceptional it really was. The irony wasn't lost on me as I hailed a taxi. For years, I'd watched Marcus climb the ladder of success while family members dismissed my career as insignificant. Last night, his friends had whispered about budget table guests and family obligation invites while sitting in a ballroom that belonged to me. But perhaps the most remarkable part wasn't the wealth I'd inherited. It was my grandmother's wisdom in keeping it hidden until I was ready. She'd understood something about success that the rest of my family had missed. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It can afford to wait quietly in the shadows until the right moment to emerge. As my taxi pulled away from the Grand Metropolitan, I caught a glimpse of Marcus and Victoria exiting through the main doors, their luggage being loaded into a limousine by hotel staff who had spent the weekend treating them like VIP guests in a property that belonged to their budget table relative. I smiled to myself and settled back into the seat. Next week, I would have some very interesting conversations with my family about my little hotel management thing. But for now, I was content to let them enjoy their honeymoon in Tuscany, blissfully unaware that their family's afterthought had just discovered she owned one of the most successful hospitality empires on the East Coast. The taxi driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "Good wedding." "Perfect," I replied, looking out at the city where I apparently owned several luxury properties. "Absolutely perfect." The comparison started when Jessica and I were children. She was 18 months older, articulate beyond her years, and possessed an innate ability to charm adults. I was quieter, more analytical, content to work on puzzles or tinker with electronics while Jessica commanded attention at family gatherings. "Jessica has such natural leadership qualities," Mom would tell relatives. "She's going to do something important someday." When I won the state science fair in middle school, the family celebration lasted exactly one dinner. When Jessica was elected student body president the following year, Mom organized a party and invited half the neighborhood. The message was clear. Jessica's achievements mattered more because they involved people and politics, the real world of adult success. High school intensified the pattern. Jessica excelled in debate, student government, and social activities. She dated the captain of the football team, organized charity fundraisers, and was accepted to Duke with plans to major in business administration. I spent my time in computer labs, building websites for local businesses, and teaching myself programming languages that weren't offered in any class. "Your sister understands how to work with people," Dad would explain when I complained about the different treatment. "That's what business is really about, relationships and communication. Technical skills are important, but leadership is what creates real success." Jessica's achievements were celebrated publicly. Mine were acknowledged privately, if at all. Jessica's college experience was everything the family had hoped for. She joined a prestigious sorority, interned with major corporations, and graduated summa cum laude with a business degree and job offers from 3 Fortune 500 companies. The family was justifiably proud of her accomplishments. I chose a different path. Instead of a traditional 4-year program, I attended a state school for computer science while building a software consulting business on the side. By my sophomore year, I was earning more than most college graduates. By senior year, my client list included several major corporations who paid premium rates for custom software solutions. But the family remained focused on Jessica's traditional markers of success. When she landed a management trainee position at a major consulting firm, Mom organized another celebration dinner. When I mentioned that my software business was generating 6 figures annually, the conversation quickly shifted to Jessica's corporate advancement opportunities. "Jessica's on the fast track to executive leadership," Dad would explain to interested relatives. "She's got the education, the connections, and the business instincts to really make it big." The implication was clear. My technical work was merely a niche skill, while Jessica's corporate trajectory represented real success in the business world. By our mid-20s, the family's financial situation had begun to deteriorate. Dad's manufacturing business was struggling against overseas competition, and Mom's retail store was losing ground to online shopping. They maintained their lifestyle through careful budgeting and increasingly creative financing arrangements, but the stress was visible to anyone paying close attention. Jessica, meanwhile, had been promoted twice at her consulting firm and was earning a respectable salary. The family took pride in her success, often mentioning her corporate achievements and professional recognition. She had moved to Chicago, lived in a trendy downtown apartment, and traveled frequently for work assignments. What the family didn't know was that Jessica's lifestyle exceeded her income by a significant margin. The trendy apartment, the business wardrobe, the professional networking events, and the social activities required to maintain her corporate image were expensive. She was accumulating credit card debt and had already borrowed against her 401k to cover living expenses. Meanwhile, my software consulting business had evolved into something much larger. What started as custom programming projects had grown into a company that developed enterprise software solutions for major corporations. We held patents on several innovations, licensed our technology to Fortune 100 companies, and maintained recurring revenue contracts worth millions annually. But I lived modestly, drove a used car, and rarely discussed the specifics of my work with family. When asked about my business, I'd mention some software projects and change the subject. The family assumed I was doing well enough, but nothing compared to Jessica's corporate success. The first time I secretly helped the family was 3 years after college. Dad's manufacturing business was facing a cash flow crisis that threatened bankruptcy. He had exhausted traditional financing options and was considering selling the family home to raise capital. Rather than offer direct assistance, which would have raised questions about my financial capacity, I arranged for an investor group to provide emergency funding through a business loan. The terms were generous, the paperwork was handled by a law firm, and Dad never knew that his anonymous benefactor was his younger son who supposedly didn't understand real business. The loan saved Dad's company and allowed him to modernize equipment, improve efficiency, and remain competitive. Within 2 years, the business was profitable again. Dad credited his recovery to smart business planning and good timing, rather than the mysterious investor who had appeared exactly when needed. That success led to other anonymous interventions. When Mom's retail store needed renovation capital, another mysterious loan appeared. When Jessica's apartment rent increased beyond her budget, an anonymous scholarship fund helped her pursue an MBA program that came with a housing stipend. Over the years, I became the family's invisible financial safety net. Through a network of shell companies, investment funds, and legal arrangements, I provided the capital that kept everyone's lifestyle intact while maintaining complete anonymity about the source. Jessica's acceptance into a top-tier MBA program elevated her status within the family to near-celebrity levels. The tuition was substantial, but between loans, grants, and that mysterious scholarship fund, she managed to complete the program without financial hardship. Jessica's MBA is going to open doors that most people can't even imagine, Mom would tell anyone who would listen. She's networking with future CEOs and venture capitalists. That's the kind of education that creates real wealth. Jessica's post-MBA position at a prestigious consulting firm came with a significant salary increase and expanded responsibilities. She was traveling internationally, working with C-level executives, and gaining experience with merger and acquisition projects. The family was appropriately impressed with her rapid advancement. What they didn't see was that Jessica's expenses had grown even faster than her income. The MBA program had introduced her to a social circle where expensive dinners, designer clothes, and luxury vacations were standard. Her new position required extensive travel, premium accommodations, and a professional wardrobe that cost more than most people's annual salary. Jessica was earning excellent money by normal standards, but she was spending extraordinary money to maintain her image as a successful consultant. The credit card balances were growing, the 401k loans had been maximized, and she was beginning to explore personal loans to bridge the gap between income and lifestyle requirements. Meanwhile, my business had expanded internationally. We had offices in 3 countries, partnerships with major technology companies, and revenue streams that generated wealth at levels the family couldn't have imagined. My personal net worth had reached 8 figures, and I was regularly approached by investment banks about acquisition offers or IPO opportunities. What started as anonymous family assistance had evolved into a comprehensive support system. Through various investment vehicles, I had become the silent financial foundation supporting everyone's success. Dad's manufacturing business was thriving, partly due to the original emergency loan but also because of ongoing capital injections that appeared as equipment financing and expansion funding. Mom's retail operation had been completely modernized through renovation grants and small business development funds. Even Jessica's career advancement had been subtly supported through networking events and professional development opportunities funded by anonymous sponsors. The family attributed their collective success to hard work, smart planning, and good timing. They had no idea that their financial stability depended on continued support from someone they considered the less successful sibling. My investment in their success was substantial but easily manageable given my business's growth trajectory. What had started as helping family through difficult times had become a comprehensive wealth management strategy that ensured everyone's continued prosperity. But the family dynamic remained unchanged. Jessica was still the golden child whose corporate achievements represented real success. I was still the technical guy who had done well enough in his niche field but didn't really understand how serious business worked. The Christmas gathering that changed everything happened during Jessica's second year at the prestigious consulting firm. She had recently been promoted to senior consultant and was working on a high-profile merger project. The family was eager to hear about her professional achievements and the sophisticated business world she inhabited. "The merger I'm working on involves 2 Fortune 500 companies," Jessica explained over dinner. "The complexity is incredible: regulatory issues, cultural integration challenges, stakeholder management, financial restructuring. It requires understanding business at the highest levels." Mom beamed with pride. Jessica's working with the kind of executives who make decisions that affect thousands of jobs and billions in revenue. Dad nodded enthusiastically. "That's real business. Strategic thinking, leadership, understanding how complex organizations operate. You can't learn that from books. You need experience working at the highest levels." I listened politely, asking occasional questions about specific aspects of the merger process. My questions were informed by my own experience with corporate acquisitions, partnership deals, and business development strategies, but the family interpreted them as curiosity from someone who didn't really understand sophisticated business operations. "It's nice that you're interested in Jessica's work," Mom said privately while we were cleaning up. "Maybe you can learn something about how real business gets done at the executive level." The condescension was gentle but unmistakable. After years of providing anonymous financial support that enabled everyone's success, I was still viewed as the family member who didn't quite understand how serious business worked. The comment that triggered everything happened during dessert. Jessica had been describing the networking opportunities available through her consulting firm, the industry conferences, the client entertainment events, the social functions that brought together successful professionals from various industries. "The connections you make at this level are incredible," she said. "CEOs, venture capitalists, investment bankers, private equity partners. These are people who control billions in capital and make decisions that shape entire industries." She glanced at me with what appeared to be sympathy mixed with superiority. "It's a completely different world from small-scale technical work. You're dealing with strategic decisions that require understanding market dynamics, regulatory environments, competitive positioning, stakeholder management. It's not something you can figure out by working on computer projects." The family nodded in agreement. Jessica had perfectly articulated what they all believed about the hierarchy of business success. Technical skills were useful, but real success required working at the strategic level with sophisticated professionals who understood how major business decisions got made. Then Mom delivered the line that ended 8 years of anonymous support. "You'll never be as good as your sister," she sneered, looking directly at me. "She's the successful one." Dad immediately agreed. Finally, someone understands business. The moment crystallized everything wrong with the family dynamic. After years of secretly providing the financial foundation that supported everyone's lifestyle and career success, I was still being dismissed as someone who couldn't compete with Jessica's corporate achievements. I looked around the table at the faces of people whose mortgages I had been paying, whose business loans I had been funding, whose lifestyle I had been subsidizing through anonymous investments and carefully structured financial arrangements. Then I replied calmly, "Ask her to pay your bills then." The table went silent. Mom's face showed confusion mixed with irritation. "What does that mean?" I pulled out my phone and called my primary wealth manager at J.P. Morgan Private Bank. "Hi, Patricia," I said when she answered. "I need to discuss restructuring some family investment positions." The confusion around the table was intensifying. Jessica looked like she was watching someone have a breakdown in public. I want to review the anonymous funding arrangements for the Mitchell family accounts, I continued. Specifically the manufacturing business loans, the retail operation financing, and the educational support programs. Patricia's voice was clear enough for the table to hear her response. Of course, Mr. Mitchell. Your family support portfolio represents approximately $300 million in various loan guarantees, direct investments, and grant programs. Would you like to schedule a comprehensive review? The silence that followed was absolute. Also, I added, I want to discuss liquidating my position in Hartwell Consulting Group. I believe Jessica works there. That's correct, Patricia confirmed. Your investment firm acquired a 40% stake in Hartwell last year as part of their expansion financing. Your representative serves on their board of directors. I looked directly at Jessica, whose face had gone completely white. Patricia, I'd like to understand what would happen if we withdrew that investment and called in the various family loans. Well, Patricia said thoughtfully, liquidating the Hartwell position would likely trigger a restructuring of their operations. As for the family loans, calling them would require immediate repayment of approximately $180 million in principal and accrued interest. Mom was staring at me like I had just announced that I was actually an alien. That's not possible, she whispered. I handed her the phone. Would you like to ask Patricia about the investment structure? The conversation with Patricia lasted 20 minutes. She patiently explained the network of companies, investment vehicles, and financial arrangements that I had used to support the family while maintaining anonymity. The manufacturing business loans, the retail operation funding, the educational support programs, even Jessica's consulting firm. Everything was connected to investment decisions I had been making for nearly 8 years. When Mom hung up the phone, her hands were shaking. You've been paying our bills, she said. I've been providing investment capital and loan guarantees, I corrected. Through properly structured financial arrangements designed to support family business operations and educational opportunities. Jessica finally found her voice. You own part of my company. My investment firm owns 40% of Hartwell Consulting Group. Yes. The capital injection helped fund their international expansion and technology modernization program. Dad was shaking his head slowly. The emergency loan that saved my business came from a fund I established specifically to support family business ventures, I explained. The realization was hitting them that everything they had achieved over the past 8 years had been built on a foundation of capital provided by the family member they had consistently dismissed as less successful. Jessica's consulting career, which had been held up as the gold standard of business success, was partially dependent on investment capital from her supposedly unsuccessful younger brother. Mom and Dad's business recovery, their comfortable lifestyle, their financial security, all of it was connected to anonymous support from someone they thought didn't understand real business. The weeks following the Christmas revelation were difficult for everyone. Years of assumptions about success, competence, and business understanding had been completely overturned. The family had to recalibrate their understanding of who was actually successful and who had been supporting whom. Jessica took the news particularly hard. Everything she had believed about her professional achievements had been complicated by the knowledge that her employer was partially funded by her brother's investment capital. The sophisticated business world she had described with such pride included financial backing from someone she had dismissed as technically competent but strategically naive. But something positive emerged from the honesty. For the first time in years, we had genuine conversations about business, success, and family dynamics. Jessica's experience with corporate strategy was valuable, but it wasn't more valuable than entrepreneurial success or technical innovation. Her MBA provided useful frameworks, but it didn't provide superior understanding of how wealth actually gets created. I maintained all the existing family support arrangements. The anonymous loans remained in place. The business investments continued to provide capital for growth, and the educational support programs kept funding opportunities that might not otherwise exist. But the dynamic had changed fundamentally. Instead of being viewed as the less successful sibling who didn't understand real business, I was finally recognized as someone who had built substantial wealth through technical expertise, strategic thinking, and careful capital allocation. My success wasn't lesser than Jessica's. It was different and in some ways more substantial. Jessica, meanwhile, began to appreciate that corporate success and entrepreneurial success require different skills but equal intelligence and dedication. Her experience with merger and acquisition projects was genuinely valuable, but it wasn't inherently superior to building and scaling technology companies. Most importantly, the family learned that success comes in many forms. Traditional corporate advancement matters, but it doesn't matter more than innovation, entrepreneurship, or technical expertise. MBA credentials are valuable, but they're not more valuable than practical experience solving real problems for paying customers. The comparison game that had defined our relationship for decades finally ended. Instead of competing for family recognition, we began to collaborate on understanding how our different strengths could complement each other. 5 years after the Christmas revelation, the family dynamics had stabilized into something much healthier. Jessica had transitioned from her consulting firm to join my company as head of strategic partnerships, where her corporate experience and relationship management skills were perfectly suited to the role. Mom and Dad's businesses continued to thrive with ongoing investment support, but they approached that support with gratitude rather than entitlement. They understood that their financial stability was not automatic or inevitable. It was the result of careful planning and family support that should never be taken for granted. The golden child system that had dominated our childhood was finally dismantled. Instead of competing for parental approval based on whose achievements looked more impressive, we were evaluated based on our contributions to family success and our character as people. I never again let anyone in the family assume that their traditional markers of success automatically made them more qualified to judge other people's achievements. And Jessica never again questioned whether technical expertise and entrepreneurial success constituted real business. The pretending was over. The anonymous support continued, but now it was acknowledged, appreciated, and understood as part of a comprehensive family wealth strategy rather than mysterious good fortune. Most importantly, we learned that asking someone to pay your bills isn't just about money. It's about recognizing who actually provides the foundation that makes everyone else's success possible. Sometimes that foundation is invisible, but it's always essential. The conversation about who understands real business never came up again. Because we all finally understood that real business success comes in many forms, and the most important form is the kind that actually pays the bills.